So I'm gonna go ahead and let Maddie hit record right now. Okay, perfect. So welcome everybody. My name is Yesenia Curiel. Pronouns are she, her, and ella for those of you that speak Spanish. And so welcome today. This is our first interview as a Firme role model. So the care office, a number of years ago, we started actually during Latinx, Hispanic, Chicanx Heritage Month. We started recognizing that we had a lot of great staff that were doing a lot of phenomenal work, and we wanted to highlight them for our student body. And so over the years, we've been able to bring on a series of speakers during a lot of heritage awareness months. And so for this month, it actually starts September 15 to October 15, which is now actually a full month. Before, I think we started off with a week, then like 2 weeks. And so I'm super excited that now it's to October 15th. So what's going to happen is I'm going to go ahead and read the bios of our two speakers that you all are seeing right now. And then we have a couple of program questions that we ask them about how their heritage, how their cultural background has influenced their careers, in order for students to be able to understand, how you can have you don't have to separate your heritage from your career. And so that integration can happen. And so I'm going to go ahead and start off with reading a little bit about Yazil Navarro. Yazil Navarro is an experienced talent and leadership development leader who joined UC Merced in 2010. She has experience working with all organizational levels, creating, designing, promoting, and delivering trainings, solutions designed to enhance organizations' business and strategic plans. Yazil is passionate about creating an interactive and authentic learning environment that supports development and employee engagement. She is a people development coach with a passion for delivering effective learning solutions with a spirited energy. In her current position as Learning and Professional Development Manager, she's a thought leader in employment engagement and learning, drawing on her unique background in leadership, development and analyst of financial industries and organizations, career coaching, education, personality, and human-centered assessments. She has a profound understanding of how to unlock the best in people and helping people in the organization to rise to their potential. She manages the new employee orientation, onboarding, mentoring programs. She is a proclaimed connector and collaborator with other UC campuses and managers from UC Merced to promote career development, growth, and staff success. So normally, Yazil, I also will make maybe a reference to Yazil. That's the name sometimes that we do. So in case that interjection might happen, but Yazil is someone who is here at UC Merced. And so we're excited that you're here with us, Yazil. I'm going to talk a little bit about Crystal Petrini. Crystal Petrini serves as a financial and administrative officer for the Department of English and Philosophy at UC Riverside. So we're excited to have a collaborator and a partner from another sister campus. In her role, she oversees all financial, administrative, and personnel processes for the department, which include close to 50 faculty and over 100 doctoral students. Crystal has been an active member of UC Riverside Staff Assembly since 2016, including having served as president during the 2019-2020 academic year. As president, she focused on efforts to advocate for and elevate the perception of staff through several mechanisms, including the University, UCOP, CUCSA, the Council of Staff Assembly, Staff Engagement Survey, letters to campus and system-wide administration regarding budgetary concerns, and speaking at Regents meetings. Concurrently, she's overseeing the implementation of several campus programs, such as the first ever UCR virtual K fundraiser and anti-racism book club. Very exciting. As past president, Crystal was instrumental in the creation of UCR staff mentor program, the Highlander Mentor Connection, other campus service during this time, including serving as the chair of the Healthy Campus Climate Change Subcommittee and as the staff representative on UCR's Provost Search Committee. Through staff assembly, Crystal also served as a junior for 2018-2019 and senior 2019-2020 delegate for UCR on the Council of UC Staff Assemblies. As a junior delegate, Crystal served on the Paid Family Leave Work Group, which advocated for strong parental leave programs in the UC in collaboration with other system-wide work groups and support of the Council of Chancellors. This eventually led to the implementation of the Pay for Family Care and Bonding program starting in 2021. As a senior delegate, she co-chaired the Fostering a Flexible Work Culture work group in order to advocate for strong flexibility for staff, which ultimately became necessary when the pandemic hit in March 2020. At the same time, she served on the Staff Advisory Committee to a special committee to consider selection of the UC president. At the end of her year as a senior delegate, Crystal was selected by the full delegation to the role of chair-elect and most recently became chair in 2021-2022 academic year. Crystal is passionate about creating a culture that supports, encourages staff to show up as their authentic self in order to build strong working relationships. She works to improve policies, processes, as well as to incorporate healthy habits into the fabric of work life so that every individual can most effectively serve the campus community. Crystal is a proud gaucho, having received a BA in political science, international relations, Spanish from UC Santa Barbara. She also holds a master's in business administration, which is an emphasis in global business from the University of the Redlands. So that is Crystal. And so thank you for both for being here. And so you all come with various experience. And the question that we have for you all right now is to really center it back to center it back to the theme for this month, which is to bring awareness of Latinx, Hispanic, and Chicano X professionals within the UC system. And so to give staff, but as well as undergrads, some awareness about how you can continue to thrive in your industry or in your work and still be proud of your heritage. So the first question is going to go to Yazil is, what were your experiences growing up? How did your identity impact your career decisions? If you can share a little bit about that, that would be great.
Sure, and thank you so much for inviting me. Well, growing up, my experiences were intertwined pretty much with the Mexican culture. So I am a proud Mexican American. So going back to my early years, always visiting Mexico and, sharing experiences, learning moments and everything with my family. We're very loud, we're very celebratory, we're always, celebrating being united in difficult moments and also in happy, exciting times. I learned a lot from grandma and grandpa. I learned a lot from my parents. I learned, that you can attain all of your dreams if you work really, really hard. I did go with my dad. I remember going back with my dad to the fields. So he used to work early on in like different crops, right? So the peach, sweet potato, those kinds of things. And he took me when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and just so that I could experience on a Saturday a little bit. And that was really an eye-opening moment for me, because I said, oh, this is where my parents work, right? So, I mean, it's just tough, but I don't want to be doing the same thing that they're doing, but I want to be able to like help others as well. So I remember going to to the fields with him a couple of times just so that I could see and experience. And then growing up also, always having and going back to that particular memory. Every time that I was about to have a big test or when I applied to the university or those kinds of things, my dad would always use that moment as a point of reference. Like, you always have to have, really good grades. So I was like an A student the majority of the times. I do remember getting a B, and that was like a moment of, my Lord, I got a B. And I did not allow myself to even be in that B, category until I had a conversation with, my friends, and they were like, Yazzie, you're pushing yourself way too hard. It's okay if you have a B. Like, it's normal, like the rest, you know. But my dad and my parents wanted me to be that, hard worker, a determined person. And, it was always, I have brought my heritage, my culture, and everything I do. And then I'm lucky to be able to be here. I did learn early on, I didn't want to be in so I have a finance background as well. So I did start in that industry. So I started in the financial industry. I used to work for 3 banks. I worked for Bank of America. I worked for County Bank, which was a regional bank before. And then I also worked for the West America Bank. I think that's what it converted into. And I learned that I wanted to align my passions, my heritage, and everything together, like this wonderful career. So that's kind of what I brought back to the higher education field, because I wanted to be able to have exposure not only to students, but then also to the workforce. So I found out that my strengths, my passions, my talents, abilities, and skill sets did have a space and a paycheck to go along. So it was also a matter of getting to know my personality, my strengths, what I bring onto the table, and also it's always a good place to be able to construct your resume in a way that it's telling a story, but then it's also constructing that future for you as well. Um, so, I mean, kind of just a long answer there, but I have been lucky to be able to find a way into incorporating not only my cultural background, but then also my talents, my education, and all of that comes together.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that and, adding that influence from your parents. That's what's really also significant, is that within the Latinx, Chicano X, Hispanic communities, our families are a big influence on who we are. So thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to go ahead and now move us over to Crystal. If you can answer that question, what were your experiences growing up? How did your identity impact your career decision?
Sure. So I grew up in a very small town in Southern California that was actually in the mountains. And I grew up biracial. So my mom is from Lima, Peru, and my dad is very blue collar from, Southern California with family from Texas and, just very all American. So I was able to grow up kind of experiencing these very different sides and being able to see, okay, this is what, you know, um, my dad's family will do, and this is what my mom's family will do. But I always felt much more connected to my mom's family. I think I was just a lot more like them in terms of my personality and my goals and wanting to be really educated. My mom came from a family where they were very musical, but then those that weren't as musical, went into law, went into international relations. And that was something that really resonated with me. I wanted to see how maybe I could start to follow those paths. And so growing up, I also grew up in a place that was predominantly white. And so because of that, being biracial, there was always this line of, but you're not quite like the rest of us, right? There's something different about you. And I think that my mom, she was a teacher where I grew up, and so she was always the head of the bilingual programs. She was very integrated into the Mexican community, and so even though our accents were always different, we always felt like there was a community for us and a place for us, even in this mountain that didn't necessarily have a lot of places for Latinos or Latinx folks. So that really impacted the way I thought of myself and also where I wanted to go, because for me, helping my community was always top of mind. What can I do to help? So ever since I was about 7 years old, I thought I'm going to go into law, because I think if I become an immigration lawyer, that's going to be the easiest way for me to help my community. And over time, the type of law would change. So it's like, okay, how can I change law maybe from a different perspective, but still helping people in my community? And when I went to college, I majored in political science, and I worked at the Latino Lawyers Institute, which was down the street from UC Riverside in the summer times, where I could intern and do translations for folks in those spaces. Again, trying to see how I could maybe mesh what my personal passions were for people in my community, but then also with what my career could eventually become. And it was only up until my last year in college, after I had taken the LSATs, that I thought, I had a conversation with my aunt, who was a lawyer in England. Actually, that's where she lives, but she had gone to law school in Peru, and she had gone to law school in England. And when I went to see her, she was a stay-at-home mom. And I just thought, how could she even do that? You've been to law school twice and now you're a stay-at-home mom. Like, all of those years of studying and sacrificing, what were they for? And she basically said, Crystal, when you become a lawyer, yes, the money is good. Yes, you're able to help people. But if you want to dedicate yourself to your family, then you have a lot of really tough decisions that you have to make. And if the client needs you to be in New Zealand tomorrow, then you have to be in New Zealand tomorrow, regardless of if you've had a family vacation plan for the last 6 months or whatnot. So for me, it really made me take a step back and look at not just my career, where I'd been so career focused, but what do I want for my overall life in terms of having a family? What experiences do I want my children to have growing up? And are those sacrifices some that I'm willing to make? So it was very late in my career that I kind of pivoted and decided, okay, maybe not law school, but maybe I can start to see how else I can start to make change and influence. And I went through, I would say, a non-traditional path. I loved the UC, but I didn't get a job at UC Santa Barbara after graduating. So I started working in hospitality and became a manager for Hilton. But those jobs are not easy, in the sense that you work a lot of weekends, you work holidays, and so you also have a lot of time away from your family, which is something I didn't necessarily want for the long term. It was okay while I was young and single, but as I started to get older and get married, my priorities changed, and I wanted something different. So after I was married, we moved back to the Inland Empire from Santa Barbara. And that's when I started working at a steel mill, actually. So, I come from this immigrant mindset, this blue collar mindset, where it's like, you just have to do whatever you need to make it work. And so for me, no job was ever beneath me, regardless of my education or my experiences. So I took a temping job at the steel mill, and I went to work every day in a hard hat and steel toed boots, and I tested rebar. That was my job. So I was there for some time, and I actually was injured, which kind of changed the trajectory of my job within the steel mill. And at that point is when I decided, UC Riverside's not that far away. I feel so strongly about the transformational opportunities that exist within the UC itself. And I want to see if maybe I can get back to the university so that I'm able to interact with students, so that I'm able to help those that are coming behind me in the same way that I was helped when I went to college at UC Santa Barbara. So I was able to kind of take all of these different experiences and bring them into higher education, which is where I then started to not only have a job that paid me and that I could go to and have a regular schedule where I didn't have to work weekends or nights, but at the same time, I had all of this other opportunity on top of that, where I could participate in service positions, which is where I got involved in the staff association and now eventually in these system-wide organizations that really help folks on a really broad scale throughout the UC. So it wasn't, it wasn't a straight line to where I am today, but I definitely think that from every job that I've been in, every position that I've been in, I've been able to really take experiences from there, the good ones and the bad ones, and really see how they could transform me to be better for that next step.
Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate it, because a lot of it, where you're talking about like values and really also being persistent and trying different things, because I think sometimes as folks that identify within, Latinx, Hispanic, or Chicano X, is like we have to do this, but sometimes our road is going to be a little bit windy, and so I think that's a perfect example about how we can still thrive where we're at, but sometimes it's gonna, we're gonna come through different roads, and so that's okay too, right? So thank you for sharing that. And I'm gonna pass it over the next question over to Yazil in regards to talking a little bit more about, the work that's happening within the work that you're doing within higher education. How has your cultural identity shaped your career experiences in higher education? And this is to really engage folks and to talk about the fact that sometimes higher education doesn't reflect a lot of folks of color, and so specifically Latinx. And I like the fact that we're both in Riverside in campuses where the student body is very diverse, but then as staff, there's sometimes is less diversity. And then as we move forward into senior leadership, it's less diverse. So can you share, how has your cultural identity shaped your career experiences in higher education?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And I believe, Yesenia, you and I have had many conversations regarding some of these, aspects as well. So as you mentioned, the staff, at least at the University of California, Merced, is certainly a little bit more inclined to have more predominantly white directors and higher leadership, which has really led in my work in human resources, has led to really kind of take a look at and even do some surveys and assessments into what is it that we need to do in order to equip our workforce, but then also try to do some engagement with our staff members. And what I am referring to is getting to know what are those gaps that we have. And we have done multiple surveys. We have done work reflecting and providing some data that culturally speaking, we do have some deficits, right, that we come with. And that is because the level of mentoring sometimes that our communities receive, since you are, in college, or maybe even prior to that, we have different exposures as well into our learning experiences, and then also the work, like the working opportunities that we have as well. So what I mean by that is there are some times that we have that desire to be at a certain level. So for instance, if I wanted to be a director or in higher leadership, the road for me to get there, it's going to be bumpier because I may not have the same network. I may not have the same support systems. I may not have the same allies and mentors, even the sponsors that we need. And so really it is a very good way of starting. But then I believe, at least at UC Merced, we need to do a lot more work. We needed to work on equipping our supervisors and managers into letting them know that it is not, I mean, it's not okay to be preventing people from, learning and growing and then attending professional developmental opportunities or, conferences and those things, but then you also learn from others. You also learn from the mentorship experiences that you have. So really, we need to do a lot of work on creating that infrastructure and in creating those roadmaps for our people, but not only for our people, then also opening the doors for those managers that have done it and really have shared their experiences, their talents and abilities, but then also, hey, here is my roadmap. Here is how I shared and how I am going to give back. So in my position, I have sort of partnered with Staff Assembly to create the mentorship program that we have on campus, also aligning leaders with the participants. And you know what? I do see that the majority of mentors that apply to be part of this program, they are not Hispanic, they are not from, the minorities. And there are some times that I have to hunt them down, sort of. I have to identify, I have to do a little bit of influencing and saying, we need you because you have expertise, because you have a similar background as I have. And so wants to connect with you because they're interested in your career trajectory. And the way that, the majority of them have always said, oh, I didn't think that somebody would be, interested in connecting with me because of that. And I said, yes, because you can share your experience, you can share this. And it's been wonderful, a wonderful response. So that is just kind of one avenue that we are kind of paving the pathway. And also another thing too that we're trying to incorporate, it's a little bit more of, strengths-based assessments whenever we're doing, the mentoring so that people can get to know themselves, their strengths, their talents, and what they are bringing to the table and to the organization, along with their core values, of course. So that is just one aspect, but I think we have a lot to go. We have a big opportunity to continue working on this. And then also within that same opportunity, there are multiple aspects that we can even provide help and support for people to be aware of what their challenges are. I do talk to a number of managers and supervisors, and some of them have openly shared, I did have, or I still do have a little bit of, imposter syndrome or those kinds of things. So just by acknowledging, you're already opening up that opportunity to improve, and then also to let others know, hey, I am part of your same team. I have been doing the work, and I'm going to continue to better myself. And then also that creates an opportunity for students to be able to say, hey, I also experience a little bit of imposter syndrome, but hey, my mentor has done a lot of work to overcome that. I'm going to do that as well. So those are just, a couple of aspects.
Thank you, Yazil. I think it's really important to identify the fact that, sometimes when we're in roles, especially as folks that identify within the community of Latinx, Hispanic, or Chicano X, is that if we don't have those role models or those people in our family, then when we're in these positions where we're leaders or we're supervisors, it's important that you're engaging with people and you're validating their experiences of who they are. So I think that's really great, especially how you touched on imposter syndrome, which can happen at any stage, in undergrad, graduate school, in your current profession. So it's about naming it and being able to really still thrive. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, how that's a big influence as well. So thank you, Yazi. I'm gonna now pose the same question to you in regards to Crystal. How has your cultural identity shaped your career experiences in higher education?
So I loved a lot of Yassi's answer too, and I think you'll hear a lot of the same kinds of themes. But actually, I would say probably it started when I went to UC Santa Barbara in terms of my experience with mixing culture with higher education. Because when I had grown up in high school or in the space that was so predominantly white, assimilation was the name of the game. And that's what people wanted to see, right? Is how do you fit into these boxes of whiteness, right? But when I went to UCSB and I started in the summer program, I immediately joined the Ballet Folklorico group there. And so I was able to, even though I wasn't Mexican, still connect with Mexican culture and how beautiful all of the different dances were. And then on top of it, then, you know, you had this immediate friends group where on the weekends we would go out dancing. We would have parties where we could salsa and cumbia and do all of these things that I really was missing from where I had grown up, you know. So it was able to really give me this opportunity to be in a system of higher ed while also experiencing all of these really beautiful cultural things. And I think it's probably even better at UC Merced and Riverside, because I mean, we're talking about over a decade ago at Santa Barbara, and I still was able to really find that community well at the university. And it's probably a huge part of why I went back to the UC to continue my career later on. And I remember a specific moment when I was talking to one of my student workers at the time when I worked in housing, where she said, you know, Crystal, I've never been proud to be Latina until I met you and started talking to you. And I realized that you can be who you are and be very proud of your culture and still be excellent in everything that you do in your work, right? So those things aren't mutually exclusive. And I think a lot of us are socialized to feel like you have to bifurcate yourself and you have to be cultural in some spaces and you have to be more white in other spaces. And I think that, you know, being able to really understand that you can be all of those things all at the same time, and that you shouldn't have to bifurcate yourself, and that it makes you even more excellent to be all of those things at the same time, is something that really, it really, you know, made me feel a certain way. I was like, wow, the student, for her to feel that and to have come from this different kind of community, and even though we're slightly different culturally, she could still understand that she could be who she was in these types of spaces and not have to make herself any smaller. So that really led to me to having a lot of conversations, even from then on, with other staff members. And every time they'd say, well, you know, in this space, I can do this, or I can say these things, but in these other spaces, I have to act like this. I'd say, no, 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 who taught you that? We've learned that and we've been told that, but it's not true. And I continue to do things that upset this dynamic and that go against these types of things that we've been taught. And I'm still here. No one's fired me. Like nothing bad happens to me, you know, so it only encourages me to continue to do those things and to continue to move on, to move in that kind of space. And even to Yassi's point earlier about the mentor program, that was a huge reason as to why I was pushing for the mentorship program to be created for staff at UC Riverside, because we do have a very diverse staff, and UCR has been, you know, #1 in social mobility for their students for the last 3 years. And I always say that it's because the staff relate so much to the students and their experiences. And many of them are first gen, many of them come from underrepresented communities, and the students see themselves in us, which makes them feel like it's possible for them to be more successful, right? So creating this sort of mentorship program for other staff so that they can see, oh, okay, here's another staff member that's 3 levels above me, but they also, you know, come from an underrepresented group, and they're also able to do all these successful things, I think is so powerful. And even though I helped create the program, I didn't initially want to be a mentor because I thought my plate's too full. I have too many things to do, you know, right now. But after, when we were doing the assignments, I saw a couple of women who had applied, who were Latinas, who were young moms, who were early in their careers and just really wanted to see how they could build their confidence, how they could navigate kind of the politics of the university. And I thought, okay, I wasn't going to do this, but I just feel like I can be that mentor for them, and I can be that person that really encourages them and supports them in the things that they need. So I said, okay, I'm going to jump in, and it's been a really wonderful experience. I think I learned just as much from them as they do from me. So I think, being able to create these spaces, to be able to thrive in them, to be able to go against what we've been taught for so long and for so many years is really just opens the path for people that come, after us. And I think higher ed is a business, right, or an institution that, even though it's based in a lot of, white supremacy theories and all of these other things that we'll get into later, I think you can still make those inroads and make those changes. And as long as you're excellent, as long as you're authentic, and as long as you're honest with everything that you do, I think people are really willing to accept that and really willing to make those changes.
Thank you, Krista. I think it's very powerful when you mentioned the mentorship again, kind of reiterating what Yazil said, because I think that's one of the key things as first generation, as folks who may not have been exposed to careers in higher education. It's important to know that there are people doing this work and happy to always mentor and support, because if we can avoid certain challenges, let's try to do that, right? That's what's really important. So it kind of goes to then the next question, which I appreciate everyone sharing about their journey, their experience, all the positive things that have been happening. I think one thing is, though, we have to acknowledge the fact that within this career of higher education, or any career that we have, if we identify within this culture, we're going to run into some challenges that might be microaggressions, it might be discrimination. So how do we overcome that? I think that's going to be really important, so folks can understand, what has motivated you to overcome any cultural challenges or discrimination, because the politics of the university where it stands, folks run into it. So any advice that you can give, Yazil, in regards to how you've overcome or dealt with any microaggression or any discrimination, not necessarily here in the UC, but maybe somewhere else as well, you can also share. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So one of the most powerful tools that I can tell you to use are policies and procedures. So know where to find your policies and your procedures. Know how to contact the people that you need to contact. So in a previous life, I did encounter challenges. In one of the ones that I was your first initial reaction when something happens to you is, I can't believe it's happening to me. And then later on, it's like, okay, what am I going to do? So in my particular situation, I always tend to put a positive spin to things. So if I am experiencing something interesting or negative, or, I always try to kind of see, how is it that I can educate the other party? How is it that I can educate that person, or, that group? So in that particular instance that I am talking about, I had a supervisor at the time who constantly made comments like, you're too young, you're very ambitious, you need to wait, you need to learn a little bit more. And I would always be, prepared and having my agenda and asking, okay, I need to go to the next level. How can I do this? So he kept, saying little things sometimes, or making little comments about how ambitious I was to others. And those were microaggressions. At the time, I didn't know what they were, right? I didn't know that he was actually, telling other people, here is Yazil, she's very ambitious, she wants to be at a level 4 or 5 when, she's barely at a level 2, those kinds of things. And it was like, but I'm doing the work. I am performing. I'm doing the work. I want to be recognized, those kinds of things. so when there was an opportunity for me to continue my development, and so he created another position, and obviously I qualified for it because I had been doing the job for a while, and or a few aspects, of that. I'm not going to get into details on the HR mechanics, but whenever you're doing a little bit more than 50% above your pay grade, then you should get like a stipend, or you should get compensated for that, additional level work that you are doing. And so, I was just really excited because for me, that was an opportunity. And so this person wasn't going to be posting that job. He was just going to bring a friend or a friend of a friend. And I said, you can't do that. So I stood up for myself and I said, you're going to have to open up that position because I want to apply for it. And we are an equal employment, opportunity employer. So you're going to have to post it at least for 3 weeks because of the level of, of a position. So in my case, it was great for me to know those policies and procedures. And then also having, I always like to have people in my support system that are knowledgeable about the areas that I don't know, right? So if I always have a good sort of network to touch up on or call them and say, hey, Yesenia, I have a question about the care program and I would like you to help me on this. So I made a couple of phone calls, with Office of Compliance, at the time, and then and they're like, oh, well, that's interesting. That shouldn't be happening, those kinds of things. And you know what? Regardless, I ended up not getting that position, and that's perfectly fine. But at least I helped so that another qualified candidate would actually get the position and not somebody's friend. So I would always say, know your policies, know your procedures, and then don't ever be intimidated or feel intimidated. Just, rely on your support system. And even if you don't know those policies, chances are there's a lot of people in the organization that are going to be able to help you. So, and you don't have to have a formal mentor either. You can always have like informal mentoring and just reach out. And then also try to look if there are any affinity groups that, so, like for me, the Staff and Faculty Association at the University of California, Merced have been a wonderful part of my support system. So in cases whenever, I've needed to just vent to people, I know I have a really good support system with them as well. And I don't want to be bringing, problems or extra insecurities to my marriage and, and my husband and all of that. So it's wonderful to be able to have spaces to share.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that, and also to highlighting the importance of mentorship, right? Because sometimes I think one of the things that happens is that as women from, women of color or people that are within these communities, sometimes we don't recognize the microaggressions or discrimination. So it's always important to run it by someone to make sure, like, am I, validate what I'm experiencing. So I'm glad that you mentioned the importance of a support system. That's really helpful, I think, for folks to understand that, and the importance of knowing the policy, right? Because sometimes a lot of things are happening and they're folks that aren't really following the policy. So you can always go back to policy. So Crystal, the same question to you. Can you share how you deal with challenges, discrimination, or microaggressions, and how do you overcome them? And again, the examples don't have to be higher ed. It could be anything that you've experienced that you feel comfortable in sharing. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think all of the advice that Yazil's given in terms of knowing the policies are important. I know whenever that has happened to me in a work environment, my initial reaction is to, fight the injustice, or, want to create some sort of behavior change, or, want to prove them wrong in terms of why they're thinking these types of things. So, I think it really just depends on the situation, on who's doing this to you, right? Or who's providing this microaggression, who's providing this challenge, where do they sit in terms of what action you can take. But I think your support system, or having folks around you that you can just at least vent with and heal with, right? Because I think that's the important part, is that, you're not always going to be able to get that person to change, or to see that they've done wrong, or report them to the right person, or, get any sort of resolution from those things. But to be able to get validation from someone, and to be able to start to see, okay, that wasn't right, and that should never happen to somebody, and how do I prevent this maybe from happening to me again in the future, right? And I think, unfortunately, we have to go through experiences like that, where, we're talked about as the spicy employee, or, whatever it might be in our workspaces, but also just in outside spaces. So I'd say, for me, it's always challenge. Maybe I can ask them, can you tell me a little bit more about why you think that, or why you say that, so that way I can challenge their own thinking, or at least get them to provide me a justification. And in some of those cases, they'll start to retreat on why they started to tell me those things. But also, I think it's important to remember that, especially in the workplace, or even in relationships, you don't have to stay. So you don't have to put up with any of those types of discriminatory treatment. And, it is good to know what your options are in terms of, HR policies and things like that. But sometimes that's just as traumatic to us, right? To have to report, and to have to go into these meetings with HR, and then fear possible retaliation, because even though those things shouldn't be happening, they exist sometimes. And that's just our reality, unfortunately, So I had a meeting where I used to be in a really toxic office environment, and, I would experience a lot of microaggressions and a lot of comments from directors and things like that. And I thought, okay, what am I doing here? Like, I'm a stellar employee. I show up, I do my job every day, help the students, I do what I can for them. And yet I'm still being subjected to this sort of treatment that has nothing to do with my work ethic, but just everything to do with who I am as a person. And that's something I can't change, and that I refuse to change, really. So, someone told me, who was another director in the office, and he said, Crystal, as soon as you feel that you're not being valued for who you are and for what you bring to the table, it's time for you to go. And even though that's not the way I wanted to, because again, my initial instinct is to fight the power and to change things, and to, to do everything, I saw that it was taking not only a mental toll on me, but also a physical toll on me. And I didn't deserve to wear that sort of weight of all of these other people on myself, in my daily life. So at that point I had to decide, okay, I think it's my time to go somewhere else. And even though it was a very hard decision, it ended up being such a freeing decision for my spirit, because I didn't have to deal with the weight of all of that kind of oppression on a daily basis. And I had already tried to fight it for so long, but again, I wasn't seeing the results that I was looking for. And so at a certain point, it was just time for me to go. And I think it's important for us to realize that that's okay, because I think a lot of us think like, you have to stay within it, you have to keep fighting it, you can't give up. But it's not really giving up. It's that, sometimes you can only do so much, you can only win so many battles. And at a certain point, you have to think about what's good for your own mental and emotional health, and make the decisions that are right for you. And in that case, that was me leaving. So I think realizing that leaving a job, or leaving a relationship, or leaving these other kind of toxic spaces doesn't make you a failure, but it's just you looking out for yourself, because if you don't look out for you, no one else is going to.
Very powerful. Thank you for thank you for sharing that, because I think ultimately, I think the fact that undergrads that are going to be watching this at some point, it's, your degree gives you a little bit of leverage and options, because oftentimes I think we've seen, family members they will stay and endure things that are not healthy for many, many years, because they feel limited options, right? And I'm glad that you talked about mental health, physical health, spiritual health, because that is who we are as an identity, right? All those parts are who our authentic self is. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And also the fact that you're choosing yourself, as a priority. I think that's also really key because oftentimes, we're not our job. We are made up of so many different parts, right? And so I think that's very powerful. And I'm glad you shared that, Crystal. Thank you. As I'm getting ready, so I'm going to spotlight both of you because as we're getting ready, I'm looking at the time. We have less than about 8 minutes. So I'm going to just go down to what advice would you give to undergrad students? Anything, I know that you all talked about support systems. Crystal, I'm glad that you shared about how director shared with you the importance of knowing when it's time to leave a position, and also the support system that you have, Yazil, that you've found here in different affinity groups, I think are great examples. But as we're as we're closing this hour, what advice would you give to undergraduate students, someone that's watching this, someone who maybe is getting ready to graduate and move into the workforce? What's something that you would encourage them to think about? And I'll pass it over to you, Yazil, and then you, Crystal, if that's okay.
Yeah, and thank you so much. I do have a little 5-month-old in the background in case you hear him. He is with someone else, but still, he might be crying by now. So I would say one of the best advice that I can pass on. So this was given to me as a piece of advice by one of my mentors. And he said, always know what you're bringing to the table, right? So if it is your personality, your strengths, your talents, and then that way you can negotiate for yourself. And I love how Crystal mentioned that nobody else is going to do anything better than you, pretty much. So you are going to be ultimately the own driver of your career. So regarding of the destination where you end up, you're going to be the own driver, right? So do what needs to do yourself a favor and do some assessments. So if it's like a personality assessment, so that you know what your like personality type is, if it's like a Myers-Briggs type indicator, or if it's a DISC or anything else. So knowing your personality helps if you're going to go into whatever level of your career. That's definitely going to help you. It's going to help you as well to know your strengths, because you're going to know what you are, talented in. But then also it gives you opportunities to learn a little bit about your blind spots. So we don't call them weaknesses. I don't like to call them weaknesses. They are blind spots. And as soon as you know them, you're going to be able to have the opportunity to get better. So know that, and then also embrace your culture, embrace your family, and stay grounded, because sometimes there are times when everything is going well and you're applying for the job you wanted, you probably get it, you are talented in everything, so you think you are in the stratosphere in Las Vegas, up there. And then there are some roller coasters sometimes, and there are challenges that you're going to be experiencing. So I really like how Crystal shared, that there are some times that you just need to roll up your sleeves too, and you just need to get the job done, whatever it is. So sometimes you're going to be starting on different positions maybe, and it's not going to be your the ultimate position that you wanted, but hey, maybe that's going to be giving you an opportunity to sharpen on those skill sets and abilities that you're going to need for that next level job or the career that you wanted. So do some self-work and embrace your culture, embrace who you are, and you will be successful at everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you, Yazil. Crystal, any advice that you would give to undergrad students?
Well, Yasi just stole the last part now, but I think it's important to be open, and especially being a young professional. And I think especially we work or we live in an age where people are like, I have to find the perfect job, because if I don't get the perfect job, then I'm going to be stuck there, and I don't want to be stuck in anything. And that's not true. You don't have to be stuck anywhere that doesn't serve you. So whether it's not your initial job that you truly wanted, it's not your dream career, it's somewhere where you feel like you need to make yourself smaller, you can always start to look for something else, and you can always move on to something else. um, I think making sure that you ask for what you want, because if you're not able to be your full self in a position, I think that's something also that's very telling. And so you can decide, you know this job isn't going to be right for me. Maybe it was the job I thought was my dream job, but the way that the culture of the company, the culture of the business, the environment that I have to endure every single day really isn't working for me. And that's completely okay. I think it's important to realize too that just we have real life things that we have to grapple with. So especially when you graduate from college, a lot of times now your aid has run out. Now you're like, okay, I need a job because I need to pay my rent, and I need to buy groceries, and I need to do these real world things. And I might not have the time to interview at these top 500 companies that I really want to work for. But where can I work at least now, so that I have an income, so that I have a paycheck, so I can take care of my basic needs, and then eventually maybe go into getting the career path that I truly want. But like I said, and like Yazzie said too, every one of those jobs is still going to give you skills that's going to help you build upon into the next job. So even, in my jobs in hospitality, where I would get yelled at all of the time, I learned to have a really tough skin, and I learned how to be nice to people, even in the most desperate of circumstances, and that's really helped me in the way that I resonate with people and the way that I respond to folks, even in my current positions now. So you'll still be able to take things from every job, but just make sure that you're not holding out for that right job to the point that it's affecting you negatively in other parts of your life. You can always make those changes, and there's always time to move on to the things that you truly love.
Great, thank you. I appreciate all the information and the insight, because ultimately, this is a month that we're celebrating, Latinx, Hispanic, Chicanx Heritage Month, but we celebrate it every day, right? As folks who authentically take pride in their culture. And so I did put in the chat, please celebrate by getting to know various aspects of the Latinx community. PBS does a really great job during Heritage Months, where they have different films, because oftentimes people think there's one look to a Latinx or a Hispanic or Chicanx person, but we come in different shades, different lived experiences. And so I think that's one key thing that's really important. I know that Maddie just put also your contact information in case anybody wants to reach out to you, but just anything that you want to, in the last 30 seconds, anything that you do to celebrate Hispanic, Latinx, or Chicanx Heritage Month that you just want to share with us briefly as we end our lovely time? Any particular events that you do or you attend or that you would recommend? I'll open it up to Yazzie or Crystal. Crystal?
I mean, I don't have any particular events that I would go to. I mean, I did start a couple of years ago trying to do a Dia de los Muertos altar in my house, just because even though I am not Mexican, I just really love that idea of making sure that your family is kept as a part of your current family. And so after I had a baby, I wanted to make sure that she knew what her grandparents and her great grandparents look like, and what they did and where they came from. And so that's a tradition that I think we've incorporated into my family. But for me also, language is so important. So, being able to speak Spanish to my daughter, to keep that going very strong, is important to me. And now my grandma's actually here visiting from Peru. So the fact that she can talk to my daughter and, engage with her and play with her all in Spanish, I know to her is a huge thing, because so many of my cousins didn't grow up speaking Spanish. So she wasn't able to have that kind of relationship with them. So I think just not only this month, like you said, but being able to celebrate our culture and who we are every day has always been important to me.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that about the language. Okay, Yazzie, any other comment?
No, I
Perfect.
was just gonna say I just celebrate pretty much every weekend, having like a little dance and just like listening to mariachi music, like with my daughter and my son who's 5 months now, but he's already liking the trompeta sound and all of that kind of stuff, which is great.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your insight and sharing your wisdom. And this is something that's going to continue to be a legacy here for our office, that we want to expose students that they can aspire to do various careers. And again, your culture shouldn't be sacrificed. So we appreciate you sharing your advice and sharing your story with us. So thank you very much. And thank you for those of you that were able to be with us. Sorry that we couldn't open it up for questions, but hopefully you were able to receive a lot of great information and just, honoring your story. So thank you again. We appreciate you here at the CARE office and looking forward to our future connections. Thank you.
Thank you for